This America, heard tomorrow ain't promised today. The end of time is like an hour away. Damn, military minded, lost it, can't find it. Stars on the flag are never shining. I saw a butterfly in hell today. Will I die or go to jail today?
Welcome to Wide Awake News. It is Friday, June 27th, 2014. I'm your host, Christina Consolo, and tonight we're going to cover a lot of topics, some radiation news, earth changes, but with today being a week before our biggest national holiday, you know, the one where we celebrate our freedom and stuff, I'd like to talk about some of the recent news on surveillance in the U.S. and the massive brainwashing campaign that is occurring to make people think that we need to be spied on 24/7. The 4th of July is for freedom, fireworks, flags, and families. And while you may be seeing friends and family and discussing how wonderful or not so wonderful our country is at the moment, use this time wisely. The last show that I did on Rense was with Charlie and Karen for the last Friday of May, and we discussed the water shutoffs that were going on in Detroit, and I'm going to update you on that situation. I'd like to point out that it's been 1 month since, and the mainstream news is just now catching up to us, although they've neglected some important facts about what is actually going on down there. So this issue is finally hitting the fan because now the UN is getting involved. But first, here's an update on Fukushima and WIP. We've got a few headlines from ENE News. New concerns at Fukushima. Radioactive material is spilling into the ocean from a layer 80 feet deep, officials suspect. GG Press is reporting record high radiation levels at 18 locations between the reactors and the Pacific. Crisis is far from under control, but most of you already know that who've been paying attention to it. There's some articles there from GG Press and NHK World. There's already 277 comments. And the people on any news are very well versed in this disaster. And if you check out some of the comments, you see that we are not alone in how we feel about this situation. Birth defect deaths in West Coast state hit record levels during 2011, spiked 60% statewide, then returned to normal in 2012. New government document lists Fukushima release along the west coast of the U.S. as a possible factor in this birth defect cluster. And there's some tables and charts from the Washington State Department of Health that you can check out. Total field deaths were 20% above 2010, which was a record high. Deaths via congenital abnormalities were 60% above 2010, also a record high, and deaths via complications of the placenta were 20% above 2010, also a record high. And if you notice, there's been some very interesting births recently. In fact, in Ohio, there was a hospital where a week apart, they had 2 sets of twins that were born sharing the same amniotic sac, which is very rare. It's called a mono-mono effect. And there's also been quite a number of celebrities who have had miscarriages, and I have covered that extensively with Lorraine Murray. In fact, we are working on an update for this. We have over 50 cases so far, so trying to keep it to a 2-hour show has become a bit of a challenge, as well as airline abnormalities, another thing that I've been covering. And last week, actually 2 weeks ago, I had to fly to Utah for an emergency, family emergency, and I had 4 flights booked. The first leg was Detroit to Chicago, then Chicago to Salt Lake, and then leaving Salt Lake to Phoenix, and then Phoenix to Detroit. Every plane had maintenance issues. And I thought, wow, you know, what a string of bad luck. And then another activist named Kevin Blanche recently flew to Calgary. When his plane landed in Calgary, my understanding is the door fell off of the plane. And then coming back from Calgary to Salt Lake City, the right engine wouldn't start. And he had a delay, I believe, of 10 hours because there's only a few flights that go into Salt Lake every day from around the country. So maybe this is just happening to activists. I don't know. But we have an update on that coming out soon as well. It's becoming very difficult to keep track of all these possible radiation-related stories. And the WIP facility in New Mexico hits highest levels since initial hours of radioactive release in February. Document link is removed from the official website. Government is analyzing samples for potential impact on human health. This just came out today. There's some tables and charts if you go to EME News. You can also get updates on what's going on with the radiation globally on my Facebook page, RadChick Radiation Research and Mitigation. We just hit 14,000 likes on that page. We hit about 50,000 to 60,000 people a week with that page alone. And I have a few other ones on Facebook. Also, check out my website, Climate Viewer News. I published a lengthy article about what I observed during my stay in Utah. You can check it out, and Jim Lee from Climate Viewer News will be calling in a bit later in the show. Now, as far as earth changes go, we've had a period of relative calm until last week. There were 2 large quakes just a little bit north of New Zealand and in Alaska about an hour apart, same longitude, which was really strange. We've had some smaller quakes in Michigan, Ontario. There's a continued swarm, which has been attributed by even mainstream news to fracking. However, I'm not sure what's going on there because this week, Oklahoma, Kansas, and Tennessee had quakes all under 4 and all in a very short period of time. And of course, we know that sits next to the monstrous, dormant New Madrid fault. Also, California has been quiet until just the last few days. There's been a swarm going on near the Long Valley caldera. You can check that out at Global Incident Map. And here's the story that ran in the Detroit News regarding the UN getting involved with the Detroit water cutoffs. And when you hear what some of the comments are being made under this article, you'll see why I felt this was important to share. United Nations experts said Wednesday that Detroit's decision to cut off water to residents who haven't paid their bills may violate international human rights. The UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights put out a press release from Geneva citing 3 experts in response to reports that the Detroit Water and Sewage Department is cutting off water access to thousands of residents in the city. Actually, they awarded a contract to Homrich Wrecking, which is a favorite contractor among the gangsters that run the Detroit City Council and the city itself, for $5.6 million to go around and turn off the water. So it's not even the Detroit Water Department that's doing this. Disconnections due to non-payment are only permissible if it can be shown that the resident is able to pay but is not paying. In other words, where there is genuine inability to pay, human rights simply forbids disconnections. UN experts said that international human rights law requires governments to take urgent measures, including financial assistance, to ensure access to essential water and sanitation. Households which suffered unjustified disconnections may be immediately reconnected, the UN statement said. The UN opinions were based on the assumption that most low-income customers are being targeted, but the accusation that the Detroit Water Department is targeting poor customers isn't true, said Curtis Garner, a department spokesman. Of course he said that. 50% of the households in Detroit have not paid their water bill. A coalition of welfare rights groups that appealed this week to the United Nations to assist Detroit residents about stopping the water shutoffs welcomed the comments of the UN experts. The groups included Detroit People's Water Board, Michigan Welfare Rights Organization, and Blue Planet Project. I'm not familiar, nor have I ever heard of any of these organizations, so I don't know how legit they are. The group said in a joint statement Wednesday that the city should immediately restore water to all Detroit residents. Governor Rick Snyder should also demand that water service is restored for all people in the state. Rick Snyder doesn't care about anybody in this state. If you want to see why I say that, look at who contributed to his election campaign. The nuke plants, DTE Energy, DuPont, chemical companies, and the healthcare industry. Those were his three largest contributors. A few comments on this article, and again, you can find this at the Detroit News' website or on my Facebook page. Gary Duvall says, they are threatening to shut off their cell phones too and cable. Better help them with that. John Sanderson said, don't forget tattoos and cigarettes are getting more expensive. Brenda Sinnott said, sure, it's a basic human right to have access to water, but not to have it piped into your home for free. Dawn Oskin Hurd said, or to have it filtered and clean and the use of the water return. Free water falls from the sky, and they can haul it in from a lake or pond. Ray Gunn said, for the people who are having their water turned off, there's a bunch of cold water in the Detroit River. Can they use that? They just need to boil it first. Well, Detroit water has never been safe. In fact, my doctor reiterated that point when I saw him recently. But I mean, to tell people, go pull it out of the Detroit River, seriously? So this was my comment. The UN is involved. Red flag. And everyone's bitching about cable and phone bills. Whoa, hello, wake up, idiots. This is all by design and has been in the works for a long time. You, as well as 99% of the rest of the commentators who are so quick to blame the people affected when you have no clue of what is really happening in Detroit, fail to realize it is a controlled demolition of a major U.S. city, and I can assure you Chicago is not far behind. So are about 23 cities in California. So are most of the cities in Europe. There is no money. The pension funds are empty. The politicians have borrowed and borrowed and borrowed and never put anything back that they took. So now they're creating major distractions to hide the fact of what's really going on and protecting the corporations and their rich friends. Land grabs will be next. It's happening already. You didn't know this? You know what else is happening down there? A few days later, CPS swoops in and takes the kids out of homes that have had the water shut off. So now they are wards of the state, and you'll be paying for that too. This won't turn out well, but of course all the angry white men on this board think everything is okay everywhere else, and fail to see that there is an agenda at play. You believe that it must be the black man's fault somehow that they got themselves into this mess. But how do you drive around and fail to notice all the foreclosure signs and empty businesses in Oakland County too? No one's at the malls. Are you too wrapped up in your smartphone to see this? Well, it's going to hurt, but if you truly think that this is just Detroit's problem, then you are very mistaken, extremely delusional, or must be brainwashed because you have something to sell or earn based on a stable economic forecast. We passed the point of no return, and everything at this point is a fairy tale when it comes to the economy. The markets are contracting, shrinking worldwide. Fake creative math is being used to fudge numbers. And for all you racist, heartless a-holes posting on here, this is not a black thing or a white thing. This is a people thing. And you are one of those people, too, in the eyes of the elite. Nothing but a slave, no matter what color your skin is, and no matter where you live. And believe it or not, regardless of whether you're a good little worker and pay all your bills on time. Ford Field, Mike Ilitch, hell, even the Detroit school system owes millions in water bills, too. But they've gotten a pass. Let's think about that for a minute. Why is that? Why are they protected? And don't even start with the, because they provide jobs excuse. There are no jobs in Detroit. By the way, a company called Homrick Wrecking was awarded a contract worth millions to go around and shut off people's water. The city department isn't even doing it. Someone was able to get a sneaky little contract in at the last minute to make someone a whole bunch of money over this, right in your face, and a fact neglected to be mentioned by the Detroit News. Just like the days of Kwame the Gangster or the late, great pillager Coleman A. Young, hooking up their buddies right to the end.